Okay. If
And
yeah, Prabhu Pavitra, usually if he can put the, I would suggest him to put the setting where host can enter without, sorry, participants can enter without host checking them in. That is better. So you are not disturbed. He doesn't have to always
okay, where
put that option.
where would that be? Under which icon, like security or closed cap?
Usually it's in the settings of, actually I do when it is in the settings of originally Prabhu Pavitra. Okay. From here, can one do, I have to think one moment.
Closed caption. Well, I mean, I haven't done anything and people have come in.
Right, right. So that means it's automatic, Maharaj. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So then it's good. It's working. So people will come automatically, Maharaj. Yeah. If
will-
you have not entered the current
Yeah.
participants, yeah, that should be okay, Maharaj.
Correct.
You can continue.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So
Right.
I will therefore begin. Thank you for those who are with us now, and we had a few more participants last month. In any event, I'll begin as we have in the past with a short invocation, and then we'll go directly to the text. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manubhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Desha Tarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gradhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. So once again, thank you very much for being present and participating in this initiative of hearing from Bhagavad Gita. We are this month hearing from Chapter-3, which is entitled Karma Yoga. This is a relatively, well, shorter than last chapter. I will begin by reading, and I have selected 4, we could say, main or essential verses that are giving us very important instructions. And as we have done in the past, we'll allow some time as well for any questions. So those of you who have the copy of the Bhagavad Gita, you can just follow along with me, beginning with verse number 1. Arjuna uvacha jayasi chat karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mamma niyojayasi keshava. Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Vyamisrineva vakyena buddhim moha yasti vame tarikam vada nischitya yena shreyo ham apnuyam. My intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Lokesmin Dvividha Nistha pura prukta maya nagha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. Nakarmanam anarambham naiskarmyam purushosnute na cha sanyasanad eva siddhim sama digacchati. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Nahi kaschid chanam api jatu tista karma krit karyate yavasha karma sarva prakriti jair gunai. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Karmendriyani samyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimurhatma mityachara sauchate. One who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Yaswindriyani manasa niyamya ramvaterjuna karmandiyai karmayogam asakta sa vishishyate. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior. Niyatam kuru karmatvam karma jayo yakarmanaha sarira yatrapi chate na prasidyad akarmanaha. Perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. Jagnartat karmano yatra lokoyam karma bandanaha tadartham karma konteya mukta sangha samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. Saha jagyai praja sritsva purovacha prajapatihi anena prasavishyadvam eshavo swista kamadhup. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, Be thou happy by this yajna, because its performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Devan bhavayatta nena te deva bhavayantu vaha parasparam bhavayanta sreya param avapsyatha. The demigods, being pleased by sacrifice, will also please you, and thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. Istan bhogan hibodeva dasyante jagya bhavitaha tair datan aprada yabyo yo bhunkte stena eva saha. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Jagya shista shinas santo muchante sarvakil vishai bhunjate te swagham papa ye pachantyatma karanat. The devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. Anad bhavanti bhutani parjanyad anasambhavaha jagnad bhavati parjanyu jagya karma samudbhavaha. All living bodies subsist on food grains produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Karma brahmod bhavan vidhi brahmakshara samudbhavam tasmat sarvagatam brahma nityam yajne pratishthitam. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. Everyone may kindly mute their microphone, otherwise we are hearing noise unnecessarily, and it is disturbing. Madhit, please send a chat message that people should mute their mic. Evam pravrittitam chakram nanu vartayati haya agayur indriya ramo mogham apartha sajivati. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice, thus established by the Vedas, certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. Yasvatma ratir evasyad atma triptas chamanavaha atmanyeva chasantustas tasya karyam navidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. Naiva tasya kritinarto na kriteneha kaschana na chasya sarvabhuteshu kaschirartha vyapasrayaha. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Tasmad asakta satatam karyama karma samachara asakto yacharana karma param apnoti purushaha. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Karmanaiva hisam siddhim astita janakadayah loka sangraham ivapi sampashyam kartum arhasi. Kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Yad yad acharati shrestas tad eve taro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Name parthasti kartavyam trishu lokeshu kinchana na navaptam avaptavyam varta eva chakarmani. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Yadi yaham navarteyam jatu karma nyatandritaha mama vart manuvartante manusya partha sarvasaha. For if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, O Partha, certainly all men would follow my path. Utsideyur imeloka nakuryam karma cheddaham sankarasya chakartasyam upahanyam ima prajaha. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all the worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. Sakta karma nyabid vamso yatha kurvanti bharata kuryad vidvams tatha saktas shikirsur loka sangraham. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned may similarly act, but without attachment, for the sake of leading people on the right path. Nabuddhi vedam janayed agyanam karma sanginam josaget sarva karmani vidvam yukta samacharan. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimuratma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Tattvavit tu mahabaho gunakarma vibhagayoho gunaguneshu vartanta iti matva nusajjate. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, almighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the difference between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. Prakriter guna samudha sajante guna karmasu tad akrishna vido mandan Krishna vin na vichalayat. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Mayi sarvani karmani sanyasya dyatma chetasa nirashir nirman mamo bhutva vidyasva vigata jvaraha. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Ye me matam idam nityam anutistanti manavaha sraddhavanto nasuyanto bhuchante tepi karmabihi. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. Ye tvetad abhyasuyanto nanu tistanti me matam sarvagyana vimudam stan vidhi nastan achetasaha. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled, and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. Sadrisham chestate swasya praktiter gyanavan api prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes. What can repression accomplish? Indriyasyarthe raga dvesho vyavastito tayor navasham agachyat tau yasya paripantino. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanustitat swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Arjuna uvacha atakena prayukto yam papam charati purushaha anischan apivasneya balad iva niyojitaha. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyenam Iha Vairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Dhume navriyate vanir yatha darsho malena cha yatol venavrito garbhas tatha tenedam avritam. As a fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Avritam jnanam etena jnanino nityavairina Kamarupena konteya duspurena nalenascha. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Indriyani manobudhir asyadhistanam uchate etair vimo hayatyesham jnanam avritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Tasmatvam indriya nyadau niyamya bharatar shaba papmanam prajahi yenam jnana vijnana nasanam. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu parabuddhir yobudhe paratastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddva samstabhyat manam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So these are the 43 verses from chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga. And some of the important lessons, points which are mentioned have to do with activities. Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that everyone has to act. Those who are not having higher consciousness means those who are totally on the bodily platform, all of their activities, unfortunately, will be creating karmic reaction. And no one can stop from acting, as Krishna explains, because all of us, that is what happens when we come in the material world, we are fully, completely under the modes of material nature. And therefore, depending on our previous lives, depending on our previous activities, we will be under mainly the influence of goodness, or under the influence of passion, or under the influence of ignorance. Regardless of which mode of nature we are being influenced by, they are all creating karma. Sometimes good karma, sometimes bad karma. And so that means that actually this very powerful influence, no one can escape in the material world, the influence of the modes of material nature. There is only one way to be actually to become freed from these modes of material nature. And this is nicely summarized at the end, the very last verse, which is one of the 4 verses. There are 4 verses that are especially important in this chapter. I'll just mention them. It is verse number 14 that begins with Anad Bhavanti Bhutani. Verse 27, Yad Yad Acharati Shrestas. Verse 37, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. And the last verse. I'd like to just speak a little bit on this last verse. Of course, anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita, I mean, whenever Srila Prabhupada would be giving a lecture, he would give a lecture on one verse. Whenever any devotee usually gives a class, we give a lecture on one verse, and one can go on for a long time because so much of meaning is within each and every instruction given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. This last, as I was reading this chapter in the last 1 month, the last verse stood out for me as being highly important, and if we can understand that, this can be very helpful in our daily activities. Basically, the message that Krishna is giving is that we have to act. We have to act mainly because it is our nature to be active. Even on the spiritual transcendental platform, the living entity is by nature active, isn't it? Therefore, the qualities that describe, let's say, the mind, the mind's 3 activities are thinking, feeling, and willing. By thinking, by feeling, and willing, this will lead us to activity. Our problem in the material world is that we are acting in ignorance. We are acting mainly, primarily for our own self because we are on the bodily platform. So Krishna is telling here, one should act, but one should act as a matter of duty, knowing oneself to be an eternal servant of Krishna. So this point is also clearly mentioned that those who do not follow the prescribed injunctions, the prescribed duties mentioned in the Shastra, then they will be engaged in sinful activities. And that is why in the Bhagavad Gita, since we are on the subject matter of karma, of course the chapter is Karma Yoga, there are 3 types of karma that are described, and it is important for us to know the difference. I'll just speak briefly on this and then come to this last verse that I mentioned a little earlier that I would like to underline, and then we can have 10-15 minutes of comments or questions. So the 3 types of karma that Krishna explains, he's referring to 2 of them. Actually, he's referring to all of them here, also in this chapter. Karma, what we call regular karma. Karma means actually following the injunctions of Shastra. And most people who follow Shastra, scripture, they do so with some material motivation. And there are many activities in the Shastra that have some material benefit attached to them. That is not the perfection. What is good about this activity, of course, is that it is something that is prescribed in the Shastra, and that as we follow these injunctions of the Shastra, we'll gradually become purified. One who does not follow Shastra, then he engages in sinful activities. And that is referred to as the opposite of karma, vikarma. It is called vikarma. There is karma, following Shastra, vikarma, not following Shastra. And the third activity that Krishna speaks about here in terms of karma yoga is activities of akarma or naishkarma. The word naishkarma has not been used in this chapter, but it is very much part of what our Vaishnava acharyas teach us. Naishkarma means no karma, no bad karma, and no good karma. If we follow the general injunctions of Shastra, which have a material goal in mind, that is called karma, and because it has a material goal, it is considered, it has karmic reaction, and therefore on a higher level, even though we are following Shastra, we are still caught up in the material world. So following general Shastra with a material goal is not ideal, but it is much better than not following Shastra. What is best, what is recommended, especially at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, after Krishna will be explaining different types of yoga to Arjuna, is performing activity that does not incur or create any kind of karmic reaction. And that is only possible on the level of bhakti, on the pure on the Lord level. So I'll just take 2 minutes to explain this last verse. I will not read the Sanskrit again, but I will read the translation and request everyone to kindly hear this very attentively. So this is text 43, the last one. Thus knowing oneself, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So here, Krishna is directly explaining that we must act above the level of our material senses, above the level of our material mind, and even above the level of our material intelligence, because all of them are material, they are limited, they are imperfect. And we must take shelter of what Krishna refers to as spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is also referred to in the Shastra as Shastra Chakshu, seeing and trying to understand things through the eyes of Shastra. And that is why if we read and hear on a regular basis such instructions as we find in the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, these are the foremost of texts that are very, very important, very powerful. If we simply hear these instructions on a regular basis and follow the good instructions given, we will be able to rise above these modes of material nature, and we will be able to become situated in higher consciousness. The end result being, as Krishna will explain later in the Bhagavad Gita, that we, by putting an end to all karmic reaction, we have no reason to remain in the material world. We are here in the material world because we are still living out karmic reaction. So Bhagavad Gita is that science whereby we are taught, Lord Krishna is teaching Arjuna how to put an end, how to completely end both positive karma and negative karma. Most people are attracted to positive karma thinking, well, it's good. If I do this, it is there in the Shastra, I will go to Swargaloka. Haribol. But going to Swargaloka is very different than going to Goloka, Goloka Dham, or Goloka Vrindavan. Swargaloka is still in the material world. That's a later instruction that Krishna will be telling to Arjuna, of course. Abrahma Bhuvanal Loka, from the highest planet in the material world, Brahma Loka, down to the Patala Loka, lowest planet, all are places of repeated birth and death. So there are many important instructions, of course, in all the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, but these four that I mentioned, text 14, 21, 37, 43, are very often quoted by Srila Prabhupada, and I highly recommend all of you to go over these particular instructions. And of all of them, I think Prabhupada quoted especially text number 14, which he especially quoted in the context of how we are living in modern day society. The translation of text 14 is, all living bodies subsist on food grains which are produced from rain, and rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. This is very much connected with the whole Varnasrama concept and the traditional agrarian lifestyle, which is, let's say, practiced and recommended actually in the Vedic culture. So to be fair to everyone, I have to stop here to give a little chance here for, So it is, we have 10 or so minutes. If there's any comment or question, we'll be happy to address that. You may kindly raise your hand so that I can recognize who's asking questions. Hare Krishna. And if you do want to speak, you have to unmute yourself. I don't hear anyone. I don't see any hands up as well. Okay, I do see a hand up. It's a yellow hand from Bangalore. Pran Govinda Prabhu. Speak your piece. Prabhu, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Maharaj, my question is about text number 3.8, where Krishna mentions about prescribed duties.
Prescribed duties,
So,
yes.
So how does one knows, yes, this is my prescribed duty and it is better even if I do imperfectly, but I will stick to this. How can one identify such duty?
Okay, very good question. How can one identify or understand one's prescribed duty? In our present day and age, this is generally more difficult because we're living in a society that is very much detached from Vedic culture. In the Vedic culture, one's prescribed duty was known from a very young age, actually. And generally, one's prescribed duty was very much in line with the duties that one's father would have. If one one's father was a carpenter, then one generally would also become a carpenter. Since we don't have this more simple and natural Vedic culture around us, therefore, and also because many people know less about what is meant to be the general prescribed duties of mankind, for one to find out by oneself, it is more difficult. However, still one can have some understanding by, let's say, following the prescription. One is by reading, especially from the Srimad Bhagavatam and also Bhagavad Gita, but more so from the Bhagavatam, what is the recommended duties for mankind within society, within a God-conscious society, Krishna-conscious society. These are nicely explained, of course, in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam by Narada Muni. And there are prescribed duties for men, and there are prescribed duties for women. So that's a whole other topic in itself. When we speak of Varna and Asrama, the Varnas are generally what is referred to in the Bhagavad Gita regarding prescribed duties. The Varnas are relate actually to one's, in modern day society, we'll say job, what's going to be my job or my occupation. So those are defined within the system of Varna. And Varna education is traditionally is for men, because Varna is meant to train one to be a leader in society. So there are many things to be said, of course, in that respect. And Narada Muni does touch on a number of them in the 7th canto. So men have a variety of prescribed duties within the Varnas, while women have prescribed duties within what is called Stri Dharma. That is the standard and general understanding in terms of Dharma. So I mentioned one of two things, by reading our literatures and hearing from our acharyas, that is one. Secondly, one should consult, because just reading ourselves alone is not sufficient. One should consult with either one's spiritual master or with senior Vaishnavas who have more knowledge and more experience in terms of what one's prescribed duty can or should be. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Yes.
More could be said, but anyways, that's the
Yes,
beginning.
ma'am.
I see another hand up, and the name is Anna. Hare Krishna. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yes.
Please accept my obeisances. My question is about verse 22,
Yes.
where Krishna says that there is no work prescribed for him, yet he engages in his prescribed duties.
Yes.
Could you please explain what the Lord's prescribed duties are? Thank you.
Your question is, what are the prescribed duties of Krishna?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Oh, okay, yes. Well, Krishna, as we know, Krishna himself doesn't have very much work because he has a lot of people working for him. Means Krishna is basically telling that through so many different incarnations, like we know how the material creation is being, or how the material cosmic manifestation comes about through what is called Mahavishnu, and then Garbhodakshai Vishnu and Kshirodakshai Vishnu. These are all expansions of Krishna. Then we have all the different demigods. We have the Saptarishis. The whole cosmology is full of explanation as to how the whole material world is functioning. So when Krishna says his prescribed duties are taken up actually by all of these different personalities. He himself, Krishna, he he doesn't have any particular work, although basically he's explaining here that I maintain, for me to create this whole material world and to maintain this material world, I have so many personalities or expansions. So in that sense, we should understand that Krishna is working through these great personalities, some of whom are plenary expansions, others are empowered entities. And Krishna basically is trying to make the point that even if I did not make this arrangement, because ultimately Krishna, he is the one, he is the Maha Ishvara. He has many smaller Ishwaras working under him. Lord Brahma is the Ishvara. Ultimately, all of us are small Ishvara, but he is, as he explains in the Bhagavad Gita, he is the Maha Ishvara. Bhoktaram Jagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the Maha Ishvara, the Supreme Controller. So he is working in that sense. And if he was not attentive, that's why he chooses only those personalities who are very dutiful and who are doing their service perfectly. Otherwise, if the moon or the sun, I meant this, if the sun changes even one small degree, the whole planet either will, go in flames because too much heat, or will turn into ice. So in other words, there's a whole cosmic material arrangement that is ultimately directed by Krishna. He's working in that way. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Yes, Haribol, Hare Krishna. Another hand is up. Yes, Anupama Kumari. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Dhanvat Pranam, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances onto your lotus feet.
Yes.
Maharaj, my question is from 3.33.
Yes.
Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes.
Yes.
What can repression accomplish?
Yes.
Maharaj, I want to ask that even in Kali Yuga, even I'm Bhakta, their mode of passion or mode of all three modes come, definitely come. So
Yes.
how to means how to remove that three modes?
Okay. Yes. So Krishna explains two things actually in this chapter, that those who are not practicing Krishna consciousness, they are forced to act under these modes of nature. And what you're mentioning is also true. Even somebody becomes a devotee, he is still under the influence of these modes of nature. But the difference is that because he's a devotee, because he is practicing, if one continues to practice, the end result will be that one day we will not be under these modes of material nature. That's the difference. Those who are not taking up to Krishna consciousness, they will be forever under the modes of material nature. That's why they are referred to as Baddha Jeev, eternally conditioned. But a devotee is someone who may still be under these modes of material nature, but he has found the process. And that process, of course, is outlined in the Bhagavad Gita, and in Kali Yuga, especially by taking shelter of the chanting of the holy name. So there are specific activities that are especially powerful to eliminate gradually these modes of material nature. It is not easy. It's a fact. We are in Kali Yuga where these modes are very, very prominent. But by taking shelter of the holy name, by taking the close association of devotees, by hearing the Bhagavatam, these are the regular practices, we can gradually, Prabhupada used to explain, Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. It doesn't happen overnight, although it could. Rarely it does. How long does it take to become Krishna conscious? Prabhupada said it can take a second if one completely 100% surrenders, but we know it is not easy. So therefore, we should simply know if we stick to this process, we gradually will be making progress, and these modes of material nature will subside to the point of one day completely not being there. So Srila Rupa Goswami explains that in the Nectar of Devotion, a devotee hopes against hope. Our situation at times may seem hopeless in the material world, especially in Kali Yuga, especially in year 2020 and 21, where we are at the peak of modern day advancement, etc. But if we simply stick to the process, there is all hope for everyone, and there is hope for those who have not yet taken the process, and that's why devotees should go out of their way as much as possible to bring people Krishna consciousness, so that they also can become hopeful. Is that okay, Mataji?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. So fortunately, I don't see any other hands up, and even if I did, it's the time is expired. Thank you all very much, and I know this is very short, and some of you may wonder why is Maharaj reading all of the verses from the chapter. I think it's very important for all of us to hear them. It's once in a month that we hear an entire text of the Bhagavad Gita. We should just fix our mind on it, and then whatever time is left to hear some explanation on some of the aspects. Kindly continue to read and to study Bhagavad Gita. It is the most important book of knowledge on the planet today. It was yesterday, and it will be tomorrow also. Thank you all very much. And I have recorded this. I will send it to our Rishi Kumar Prabhu. And because he's a Rishi, he'll get it out to all of you. Thank you very much. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki. Hare Krishna. You can all unmute and say together, we can chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Everyone unmute. Hare Krishna.
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Hare
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama.
Hare
Rama,
Rama, Hare
Rama
Rama,
Hare
Rama
Hare.
Rama, Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Haribol. Thank you all very much. Please continue.
Hare Bol Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you, Lalit Prabhu. We'll see you again soon.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare
Haribol.
Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
Hare Bol.
Hare Krishna.